We touched on the outcomes of performance in learning about Campbell's components. The process of determining how well a person is performing those components is sometimes referred to as performance evaluation or performance measurement. Thinking about those processes raises three questions. How can we measure performance? What influences the measurements? And how does it impact the person whose performance is being measured? Just like there are usually at least a few different assignments and exams that are used to determine your grade in a class, there are a few ways we can collect data and different types of data we can collect to measure performance in other settings. Hands-on measures are when an employee actually does the tasks they need to perform for the job, usually in a simulated setting, and someone observes and scores the related actions. Electronic performance monitoring is pretty much what it sounds like, using technology to monitor work. It seems like this has gotten a lot more common in recent years as technology has become more sophisticated. I've been thinking about this with package delivery. I have a feeling the post office, UPS, and FedEx all use the tracking data on packages to measure performance of the people who deliver the packages. The reason I've been thinking about it, though, is because in the last month I've had 3 packages delivered to the wrong address, one with each of the services. I'm a little surprised the electronic performance monitoring isn't sophisticated enough to alert them that they don't appear to be at the right address. The fact that I think about that, though, goes with some of the points from the reading about the downsides of electronic performance monitoring. It's a little creepy to realize an employee's movements can be and are tracked that closely. Rating formats of measurements are much more common, in part because they tend to be less expensive to develop. You might be familiar with at least one example of a performance rating system, the end of semester teaching evaluations. The methods of collecting data generate 3 types of data. Objective data would be things like the number of units produced or the number of customers served. Personnel data includes the information that would be stored in an employee's personnel file, like the number of days they've missed work or been late for work. Judgmental data is the impressions of others. If we compare that to your work as a student, objective data would be like multiple choice tests with right and wrong answers. Personnel data would be like basing a portion of the grade on the number of times you entered the course site, and judgmental data would be scored on open-ended questions or papers. Thinking about it that way, then, it might not be much of a surprise that the 3 sources tend to give different perspectives on performance. They're each based on a different perspective, so the results don't tend to be consistently correlated. That also means it can be tricky to give a single overall score for performance. Ideally, the only thing that would influence performance measurement is the behavior or work product of the person whose performance is being measured. Practically speaking, though, there are a number of other things that influence performance measurement. The discussion for this module will help you think about the factors that influence performance ratings other than performance, but they can generally be grouped into 2 categories: the methods of collecting data and politics. Electronic performance monitoring may be the closest to being truly objective, though what data is used is based on subjective decisions about performance. The scoring or rating of hands-on performance demonstration involves a degree of subjectivity, as do most rating scales. Part of the reason that subjectivity is important to keep in mind is because the goals and motivations of the person doing the rating can influence the data. The Behind the Masks article with this module, summarized in the textbook, gives some vivid examples. In many cases, though, the influences are much less personal. The scale and process of ratings can each introduce problems that influence performance ratings and have nothing to do with politics or with performance. I'll explain more about that in the recordings about performance ratings. One of the reasons it's important to think about the accuracy of performance measurement is because the resulting data can have a substantial impact on the life of the person being rated. Performance data is often used to make decisions about a person's future, including whether they'll stay with the organization. For college students, the parallel is using a student's grade point average to determine if they're on academic probation or suspension. When we're thinking about employees, the data can influence both terminations and layoffs. Promotions and other administrative decisions are also often based on performance data. though performance in the current job should probably not be the only criteria for promotion. We'll think more about that in the staffing module. Similarly, there are some concerns about connecting decisions about pay and raises solely to the performance measurement. Some organizations separate individual performance evaluations from decisions about raises. Performance measurement can also have a psychological impact on the person whose performance is being measured. In addition to the potential stress created by issues related to the issues I mentioned in the previous slide, the process of providing feedback can have a direct psychological impact. In some cases, it can have a positive psychological impact because it helps reduce uncertainty and provide validation. Feedback can also provide helpful information about how to improve. To be helpful and have a positive psychological impact, though, feedback needs to be delivered very deliberately. If performance measurement suggests a person has numerous opportunities to improve, the feedback can be more beneficial if it's organized by themes or common issues, and it might not include everything the person could improve. Similarly, it's helpful to include both strengths and weaknesses. Perhaps most importantly, though, the feedback should be behaviorally based. In other words, it should focus on what a person is or is not doing rather than personal characteristics. Focusing on behavior helps identify what can be done to improve performance. It also helps avoid destructive criticism because it tends to be more specific rather than general criticism that's hard to act on. Focusing on behavior also reduces the chances that feedback will feel like it's personal rather than job related. Thinking about the impact on the person whose performance is being evaluated helps highlight why it's important to think about the process, what's being measured, and as well as what is influencing the measurement. While it might not be possible to use completely objective information, there are ways to maximize accuracy and fairness.